One of the topics we've been covering extensively at News Channel 5, Lake Okeechobee, and the issues that flow from it, and there are a great many. Algae, water levels too high, plans for a reservoir south of the lake, the health of the Everglades, and our intracoastal communities. Our Alex Hagan has been doing a great deal of that reporting, and here's a story he recently did about the proposed reservoir.
At Stewart Angler in Port Salerno,
right on a little bit of a drop.
Giles Murphy
Get out the push button.
Does the best he can.
10 or 11 miles offshore.
Despite business lost after those discharges.
95% at least.
And you can hear the frustration in his voice.
Trying to get stuff done for way too long.
As he waits for a reservoir to be built south of Lake Okeechobee.
Doing it in a pretty timely manner.
And the South Florida Water Management District is getting the ball rolling on Senate Bill 10.
Matches up and works well with other projects.
However, one of the points made during a second meeting on the reservoir is it's not a silver bullet to major storm events. According to district leaders, the lake rose more than 500 billion gallons after Irma. The reservoir south of the lake could only hold less than 20% of that.
We had every component in place. Reservoirs north, south, east, west of Lake Okeechobee. Probably Irma dealt us a blow that would still have required discharges to the estuaries.
That said, the reservoir is a dynamic tool that can reduce discharges.
Like my lifelong dream.
Giles knows this, as it's a good step forward to recover from lost business.
As long as the new reservoir can handle the runoff during a normal rainy season, that's good. That's enough.
Now, the South Florida Water Management District is continuing with their plans to build a reservoir. They have to submit their final model to the legislature in January. And Michael, obviously, a story there with so many points there, and a key takeaway is how big that project is, but also other projects as well.
And your words, there is no silver bullet. Whether you've lived here a long time or a short time, whether you've done the kind of dynamic reporting you've been doing out there for the past year plus, no single answer to this enormously complex water ecosystem we have. Having said that, let's try and pare it down just a little bit. Talk a little bit more about the reservoir, because it's interesting. People say, send the water south. Reservoir, not everything that environmentalists want, but it's a start, and yet not, as you said, the silver bullet. Talk a bit more about that.
Well, this piece, really talking about there is a need for other projects, but I don't want to take away, we shouldn't take away from the point that this is a very dynamic project that they're building south of Lake Okeechobee. I mean, you can throw the numbers out there, reducing discharges by 60% or so, but they're still in the process of planning for it. I mean, this legislation, it's a fast track. The South Florida Water Management District has never done a project like this in terms of fast tracking it, getting it done in a X amount of time.
And they want to have it done by when? And I think it's $1 billion plus in state money, waiting on the feds to come up with their share, then getting it done on existing land. Talk a little bit about that.
They want to get it done within the next couple of years. I mean, people on the Treasure Coast are tired of seeing those harmful discharges east and west, and also people on the west side of the state, but really adamant about getting this done. They want to submit plans, as I said, by January, and then they want to get approval from Congress, because that's another piece. This is not set in stone. They have to get approval from Congress, from the federal government, in order to put in their side of the money.
Yeah, promises are one thing, the money's another, and that's been the devil's been in the details in the appropriations for 17 years since this comprehensive Everglades plan came out. Talk a bit more broadly about it, and I know you've covered this issue more broadly. Let's throw up a map, because it's such a complex plumbing system with Lake Okeechobee at the heart of our water resources. You see, of course, the lake from the north, the Kissimmee River Basin flowing into the lake. Let's keep this map up too, Tom, as Alex talks about. Then, of course, to the east, St. Lucie River, Indian River Lagoon, the estuary, the Caloosahatchee to the west. And south, of course, environmentalists say that when they started diking the lake back decades upon decades ago, that they cut off the natural flow of water to the glades, therefore hurting the plumbing system and our water system to the south. So when you look at that, it's an enormously complex issue, and anything that happens in one place impacts another. As you look at that map, talk about some of the larger systemic issues you've been covering and their impact.
Well, you and I both know I was up in the Kissimmee River Basin. That is the heart of the issue. You look at it north of Lake Okeechobee, and you look at when we had a hurricane, maybe an unprecedented amount of rainfall with Hurricane Irma. We're not going to get a Hurricane Irma every single year, but we owe this. But I went up to the Kissimmee River, and you look at the amount of water that flows into Lake Okeechobee, billions of gallons, and whenever you get a storm, it outweighs the amount of water that's being discharged and that's why they discharge the water, of course, and that's what we don't want to see. But they have nowhere else to put the water, and we don't want to see lake levels. This year we saw lake levels get up to higher than 17 feet. We haven't seen that since, I want to say, Hurricane Wilma, or was that 2005? But you look at that, and you have to take into account about the issues of the folks around the lake and their safety.
And of course, and you've covered this, there's issues about storage north of the lake, which people south of the lake should be happening. The agricultural interests say, what about storage north of the lake? You've covered that. There's the issues about the water flow east and west. There's even issues, and you've covered this, about some arguing for deep water injection wells that would go beneath our drinking water down to the Floridan aquifer. But for every possible solution, there's money and there's objections. There's this constant push and pull, and you've covered it expertly. Talk a bit more about that.
Exactly. I mean, from the Treasure Coast, people are very adamant about sending the water south, and that's a dynamic project. And people around the lake, they're talking about water storage north. You mentioned the deep injection wells. They're very supportive south of the lake about deep injection wells, looking at that as a possibility. There's concerns from environmentalists on the Treasure Coast about the deep injection wells. You know, is this the right way that we should be storing water? Whereas, you know, why don't we do the natural flow, send it south into the reservoir, treat it, send it back down in the Everglades like it's natural flow, like you mentioned before. But people south, and it's just this issue where what's the priority here? And both sides have different priorities in how to fix this issue. And you talk about north of the lake, storing it before it gets in the Lake Okeechobee, because, you know, after all, that is where the majority of the water is coming from. And then deep injection wells, like you said, is another possibility.
And a controversial one. Throw the map up one last time. Then you've got the issue, the ag interests to the south say reservoir, existing land, but environmental interests say, listen, lest we can create a broad sheet of water moving down into the Everglades and therefore percolating down into our drinking water supply, which is crucial to millions of us, of course. It's our primary source of drinking water. Down through that plumbing system, we're going to have issues. So it's this constant tug of war between what's happening now, drinking water, the flood and algae crisis to the east and west, and of course septic runoff. That's also another suburban urban issue. For you as a reporter, I've seen you really tackle this story. We're not going to settle all these issues here today, but what draws you to this story as a reporter? Because you've really jumped feet first into one of the most dynamic stories that impacts us as much or more than anything else in this entire region.
I think that's exactly why I've taken
I
interest.
see your eyes light up. Yeah.
Because so many people care about it. I've never, in my 6 years of reporting in the industry, second year down here, I think people here care about this the most, or what I've seen. And it's such a dynamic issue here, and water is what we care about here. Water is essential for so many things. Tourism is the #1 thing, but we also have to take into account that agriculture is important to our state as well. You know, I'm out there in the glades all the time, and I see, you know, the sugarcane crop. You know, U.S. Sugar, one of the, you know, top sugarcane producers in the country, if not the world. I mean, you see how important that is to the state of Florida. But the reason why I've taken interest is because I care about the water, but you also have to take into account that we need to protect the other side of it as well. So water quality, everything here, but also agriculture. So it's just such a back and forth issue. I don't know. I've taken an interest into it. Yeah,
eloquently said. It's one of the most dynamic issues we'll cover. And if you care about drinking your water, and if you care about everything that else goes into your water supply, recreation, environment, agriculture, farming, all part of one of the, I think, the biggest environmental story we'll see down here overall. Going forward for the next decades, and you're on the vanguard of really doing some outstanding coverage. Final quick thought.
And being a resident here in Florida, I cannot wait. I cannot wait until I can see, we never have to see those algae blooms ever again. And I remember 2016 and seeing that and how devastating it was to the ecosystem, to tourism and everything. I can't wait, and it looks like this year will be the year that we finally get things rolling.
Thanks as always. We know you'll be back out there doing great work, and we'll be back with more in just a moment.